want to be respectful of everybody's time, so I'm going to start the introduction as folks are entering. Although I do feel like, you know, some people just don't need an introduction, and Bilal to me is just one of them. It's Bilal, yeah, of course. But it's actually my pleasure to introduce Bilal Khan, who's a co-conspirator on the RDAR grant. He is co-director of the LNC core and has developed this platform, Odin, that we're going to learn tons about today. But I did go back and dig around in his CV, and I just wanted to highlight a few things because it's pretty fun, because I actually didn't know much about your background, Bilal, embarrassingly. So it was great to learn. I mean, you know, a bachelor's of science from MIT in math and computer science. Then, you know, just going off to another slouchy university like Johns Hopkins and getting a master's in computer science, and then a PhD in mathematics. And I have no idea what that title means. Algorithmic problems on automorphic conjugacy in the free group of rank 2. We'll have to have a beer and talk about what that means later. But, you know, what it clearly did was to set you up to do all of the kind of great stuff you're doing now with network and computational social science, social organization in wireless digital devices with the Internet of Things, amongst so many other things, all your grant successes. And I just think it's so cool you moved from being a professor at John Jay College and being a professor of mathematics and computer sciences to now being a you know, a Happel professor of sociology with an appointment, some in computer science, but mostly sociology. I think that just shows, you know, the genius of your thinking, the flexibility of your thinking. And I know from a personal perspective, I am so pleased to have you as a colleague and working together with you. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Bilal.
Thank you so much, Rick. You're very generous. And thank you everyone for coming on to hear this presentation. It's the middle of the summer, and I know there are many things you could be doing. So I'm going to try and talk you through this new technology that we have available, and hopefully have enough time at the end to have some free-form discussion and brainstorming. So I want to start us off just by talking about the motivations for this system. And actually, the design of this system dates back to 2009, when we first started to build it and design it. The idea was that we wanted to maximize the granularity of self-reported attitudes, behaviors, and experiences over time. And I had just started to be involved in social science research, and I, you know, had this feeling that the way in which we were collecting data, which was essentially paper and pencil surveys or in-person interviews using some of those newer technology platforms, was limiting the type of theories that we could build. So we wanted to maximize the fine-grainedness of the data that we're collecting, but at the same time, minimize the participant burden, because if we asked everyone the questions all the time with ridiculous sort of frequency, then they would all just leave the study. So the approach, the basic philosophy is that you should only ask a question when you have some confidence that it will produce a valuable and interesting answer. And otherwise, you just shouldn't, because the benefit to you scientifically from getting that data is less than the cost in terms of annoyance to the participant. And there are lots of problems with this philosophically as an approach in terms of maintaining unbiased data collection, but that's the gist of it. And when you sort of peel that philosophy down to its core, it comes down to saying that if you're going to only ask questions when you have some confidence that they'll produce a valuable piece of data, then the question has to be asked in a way that is sensitive to the context of the participant. And so that's the bottom line that you arrive at. How do we ask questions in a context-sensitive way? And that pushes you into considering, well, what on earth do you mean by context? And there's sort of three distinct types of context that we're interested in a lot of times in the social sciences. There's distal context, what you've told us about yourself in the distant past. There's the proximal context, which is also temporally linked, and it has to do with your recent experiences. And then perhaps there's, in addition to time, there's a spatial proximity, what's going on right now in your physical surroundings. That might be your spatial context. So that's usually what we mean by context. And now the question is, if I'm supposed to ask you questions based on your context, well, I better not irritate you to the just by collecting data about your context so that I can figure out whether it's okay for me to ask the question that I really want to ask, right? So the idea was that figuring out what the context is should be passive and happening in the background all the time. Like, I shouldn't be bothering you to figure out what your context is. I should just be somehow magically figuring it out using sensor data. And then once I know what your context is, or when I think I know what your context is, then I'll ask you a question. If I think that it's likely that the answer will be of value to me in my scientific research. So the types of sensors that we looked at and we're looking at now are GPS sensors, which help you to infer what the location of a person is. We're using Bluetooth low energy scanning to determine whether you are physically located in the same place as another person in the study. Bluetooth can also be used to find beacons. Beacons are essentially small devices that emit a signature that your phone can pick up and determine roughly that you're close to the beacon or far from the beacon. Beacons are super cheap compared to phones. An average beacon might cost you $10, and its battery would last, 6 months, whereas phones are more expensive. You can also use the accelerometers in your phones to figure out whether a person is sitting down or running or driving or riding a bicycle. And then there are a lot of biosensors like the Empatica E4 and other devices that are wearables, and they measure things like your heart rate, your skin sensitivity, your skin resistance, and your heart rate variability. And these things can be used to infer physiological states that are correlated to psychological states. And then, of course, there's time. That's just the clock on the wall. And there's also historical answers to previous questions. So that's all going into the definition of context. So this is sort of the data architecture of the system that we built. On the left, you have a researcher. And in step one, the researcher creates questions and rules. The questions are essentially the survey protocol, and the rules are the logic that define when the questions should be asked. In step two, these questions and rules automatically update an app. The app is installed on the participant's phone. Then in step number three, this app is continuously running, and the participant's context data is continuously collected. That could be time, biosensor data, their social interactions based on their location based on GPS, and so on. And then based on this contextual inference about context that's going on in the phone, the participant is prompted with appropriate questions. That's step 4. The participant answers those questions, and the answers are stored on a server, the same server that the questions and rules were being stored on. And then finally, in step 6, while this is all going on, the researcher can go to the server and analyze the data that's there. So hopefully that high-level picture is clear. We'll walk through it, and then I'll log in to the server, and I'll show you the whole thing happen. So this is step 1. Step 1 involves designing questions and rules. Normally, when you design a survey in the social sciences, you just focus on questions like how many drinks, how much alcohol did you drink yesterday? This is this question. But now, associated with each question, there will be some set of rules that will govern when that question should be shown. And we'll go into this in some detail in a second. In step 2, the researcher generates coupons. A coupon is a unique identifier that anonymizes the data that is being collected from a participant. So here, for example, we see a bunch of different coupons. They're essentially just strings of random digits. And now in step 3, the researcher has to actually recruit and distribute the coupons. So here, there's the eligibility criteria. I can't help you with that. You have to find your sample. You have to convince them that that study is worth doing. And then once they agree to that, they download this app and you give them a coupon. And here it is, the app is running and they type in the coupon. When they do that, the app connects to the server and customizes itself on the basis of your particular questions and rules for your study. And then from then on, the participant carries their phone around for however long your study is, and the context is being monitored. And when the right time, when the right context arises, the appropriate question is fired. So that happens until finally the participation period ends and the participant can come back to you as a researcher and say, I'm done, I did what you told me to do. And then you as the researcher can pull up the phone, look at the participation level and decide on, based on your incentive plan, how much you're going to remunerate the participant for their participation in your study and contribution to the data collection effort. And then finally, in step 6, as a researcher, you can go and examine the data that was collected. And here are some examples of a particular person who was asked questions at particular times and they answered them. And these are the responses that they gave. Okay, so I want to show you this now live in a demonstration. Hopefully you can still see my screen.
We can.
Excellent. Okay, so here I am. I'm on the browser. I am connected to the SNRG UNL EDU website. I'm going to go and log in. Let's see. Okay, so here we are. When you first log in, you get this this screen, and here are all the studies that I have created. These are all the studies that perhaps other people have created and added me to as a collaborator. Green means that the study is still in preparation. Blue means that it's in progress. Orange means that it's over. So let's create a new study. When you create a new study, you have to give it a name. So this is LNC Live Demo. And the duration is how long each participant is going to be involved in the study. Well, I don't know. 1 day. Okay, let's say 5 days. This is the description field. This is the LNC demo. Over here, you specify what sensors you want to be running inside of your study. So if you say GPS, then it means that you'll be able to have questions that are triggered by the location of the person. If you don't say GPS, then you can't ask those types of questions. You can't provide those kinds of rules. So it's important that you select the appropriate subset of sensors. So I'll just say GPS. When you click one of these sensors, you have to specify certain details about how you want that sensor to run. So in particular, over here, when you choose to have GPS running, you have to say how frequently you would like to record the GPS location of a person, and we'll just say every 5 minutes. And you can also give some kind of threshold that says don't bother recording GPS if the person hasn't really moved, but we won't worry about that. And then these other sensors have to do with Bluetooth. And for example, proximity BLE is used to detect when 2 phones are near each other. So you might have a study population, for example, students in a class or students at UNL, and you might be interested in tracking when they happen to be in physical proximity, and you might want to ask them questions based on when they're hanging out together, or when they stop hanging out together, or when they haven't hung out together for a long time, or any number of sort of logical predicates that refer to co-location and potential social interaction. So let's sign on for that. Okay, so check that box. It means now I can have rules that refer to being close to other people in the study. And again, I have to specify about this sensor, how frequently do I want to record? And let's just say 5 minutes, every 5 minutes. So we'll just settle on those and say create that study. Takes a second for the server to sort of set everything up for your study now, and that's what's going on. All right, so now here is a new row, which is the LNC live demo study. It's green because we're still preparing it. So let's go in there and look around. Here it is. So there are many different tabs up here. There's the About tab, which tells you the study name, how many days, this is the description. And we see that there are 2 sensors active, the GPS sensor and the Bluetooth low energy sensor. The study is in preparing phase. It was created at 3:51. And there are currently no other people who are collaborating with me in the study. Well, that's not very nice. So I'm going to add Kin over here to my list of collaborators. And so now Kin is over here. If he was to log in, he'd be able to see this study as well. All right, now let's just look through the different pieces over here. One of these first tabs is the survey instrument. This is where you go to specify your questions and then associate to each question a set of rules that will indicate when the question should be asked. So we're going to just quickly create a couple of questions here. The first question will be a multiple choice question, and you're allowed to have randomization of the choices. We won't worry about this just now. Every question has to have a tag. The tag, you can think of it like in the code book, it's the name of the variable in the code book that will be generated. So let's call this optimism question. And there's a description here. This goes into the code book. We won't worry about it. And this is the actual question then that's shown to the subject. So my question will be, how are you feeling about the rest of your day? All right, so that's my question. It's multiple choice, and I'm going to say create. So here's my first question, and you can see it's got a tag. It's a multiple choice question. Right now, we only support multiple choice questions and fill in the blank questions, but we developed the whole thing. So for some researchers, we are developing other types of questions. For example, Anna Jaffe would like questions that are essentially a small psychometric evaluation. And so we can have those kinds of custom questions that might be particular to a study that you are interested in doing. Now, associated with the question, you have, since it's multiple choice, we have responses. So let's say I'm feeling very optimistic. Okay. Let's just say optimistic. Save. Neither good nor bad. And I am filled with dread. Okay, so those are my 3 choices here for my multiple choice question. And then I'll add another question perhaps that just says something. It's not multiple choice, it's fill in the blank. And its tag will be thoughts. And the description we won't worry about, we'll just say, what are you about right now? So this is a free text question, and I'll create it. All right, so these are questions, and that's just a straightforward survey, same way you might have in Qualtrics or something. But now the key difference here is that associated to each of these questions, you can add some rules. And in fact, you can add multiple rules. So but we'll just try and do this, you know, one rule for each of them. So when you click on add rule, it asks you what kind of rule are you interested in adding. And there are many, many different kinds of rules. Rules can live on the phone or they can live in the server. I won't say much about the server-based rules, but in the phone here, you can see that there are different types of rules and you have to choose which one you would like. For example, because we enabled the GPS sensor, we can have a rule that says, upon arriving at a specific location, I want to ask this question, right? Or upon forming a group of participants, I want to ask this question. So the one that we're going to look at just now is I'm going to just do it on the basis of time because I'm the only person sitting here and I'm not planning on leaving in the middle of the presentation. So I'm not going to be able to artificially trigger any of these other rules and convince you that this is really happening live. So I'm going to just do it on the basis of time. So upon recurring time interval, I'd like to ask this optimism question. And what I'm going to do is now once you've said what type of rule you want, you have to provide some further details about that rule. So here it's saying, well, what time or how frequently would you like this question to be asked? And this is sort of the description of it. Ask this question to the participants in groups G every X units of time at time and date Y. So there's a sort of technical description of it, and then you're supposed to fill in the blanks. What I'm going to say here is that I'd like to ask this question every hour at, let's say, 10 minutes past the hour. And I'm timing this because I'm hoping that I'll be there at 4:10 and you'll be able to see this question asked. So I want it every hour at 10 minutes past the hour. And then I want it to be, the question to be shown for, let's say, 5 minutes, which is 300 seconds. And you can separate your participants into groups and have one set of questions for one group and another set of questions for another group. And you can dynamically move people in between groups and all kinds of stuff like that. But I won't say much about it. We're just going to have one group. Okay, so this is our question, and this is one of the rules that causes this question to fire. And we could add more rules and make them fairly complicated. This is sort of the simplest one. It's going to fire at 4:10. And then over here, this question, what are you thinking about right now? I'm going to add a rule which is called the discretionary button press rule. So this is a rule that says, ask this question when the person presses a button that is going to be installed in the app. So it's totally voluntary, this type of rule. It's not sort of passive, and it's something that's potentially interesting because it involves giving the participant the possibility of taking the initiative of providing data when something interesting happens. So I'm going to make this type of rule discretionary button press. Now, when you have that type of rule, you have to say, what's that button going to be labeled by? So it should be labeled by something that articulates with the actual question that's being asked when you press the button. So here I'm going to say report my thoughts. That's the label of the button. You can have lots of different buttons on your screen automatically installed in your study. We're going to put this one at the very top. we're going to give the person 5 minutes to answer. And this is only going to be used for people in group 1. So that's my discretionary button press rule. All right, so hopefully you get the sense of it. This is a live demo. It has 2 questions. Each question has 1 rule. This one's based on time. This one's based on pressing a button. Now, every study has a consent form, and the consent form has many different pages. There's a welcome screen, and then maybe there's a privacy screen, and so on. There's a lot of different screens here. And on each screen, there's a short form and a long form. I'm going to take the short form of this welcome screen and say this is Ellen's demo. So your all right, so that's my, I've made a change to the default. All right, so consent forms are done. My survey is done. And now I'm going to go and generate coupons because I have to recruit people to enter my study. All right, so this is the coupons page. Let's say I'm going to go out and give 10 coupons today. I'm feeling very, and they're all going to be people in group 1. So I do that. And lo and behold, these 10 coupons have been generated and they're all inactive right now. So I go out there and I recruit people, and well, let's see who I recruit. Well, you know, this is a talk, so I recruit me, and that's my coupon. So I recruit the person and I say, hey, go download this app. We're going to pay you if you participate. And then once you download it, type this in for your coupon. All right, so what do you do? Now I have my phone in front of me. And what I'm doing is I'm scraping it so that you can see it. Okay, so here it is. This is actually my physical phone, but it's being scraped into a window. Okay, so I'm going to run the Odin app. And then here's Odin app running, and then I'm going to type in this coupon, which is LKTIX. All right, so there it is. And if you had the Odin app downloaded, you could use one of these other coupons over here and register, but you couldn't use the same one because that's mine. Well, I mean, we could, one of us would get it and the other would be rejected. Okay, so I'm going to press register. Ooh, so what I see is it says the study is still preparing and no phones can register. So turns out that this is after you've sort of set up the study, you have to explicitly go over here and say, I'm done setting this study up, and it's no longer in preparing. I'm going to push it into the in progress. So this is sort of the launch phase. So I press next. It's a one-way street. Once you say I'm ready to go, you cannot go back. So there it is. Now it's in progress. And now if I go back to my phone and I press the register button, there I am. Okay, so this is now my phone, and that's what it says on the screen, and you're watching it because I'm scraping it. And here it says, this is the LNC demo. Your consent is implicit. Okay, so I'm going to press next, then go through all of these screens. Each of them has got a short form and also got a long form. For example, this is the long form of the data gathering screen. You keep going, you read everything, and it tells you about stuff like withdrawing and so on. And you get to a final page. It says, I've read about this research study and I agree. You say, I agree. And then you say, yes, really, I do agree. Okay, so now the app is running. And well, it's now 4:05, and at 4:10, we should see a question. In the meantime, if I go over to, there are sort of three screens over here. The home screen is where you see any questions that are waiting for you to answer. On the report events screen, which I'll go to now, you see all the buttons that you requested as part of your studies. You remember in our survey, we have thoughts, and there's this button rule over here, which is why there's this button installed over here. So if you press this report my thoughts, the first time you run this, it gives you a little tutorial. We'll skip that. So this is the question. It says, what are you thinking about right now? You say, I am thinking about submit. So just voluntarily press this button, triggered this rule over here, and been asked this question over here because that's the rule that fires this question. Okay. So hopefully you have a sense of this. And now if while we're waiting for the 410 rule to fire, we can go over here and look at some of the other areas of this website. The participants page shows you all the coupons that are currently active. So here is the only coupon that's currently active is the one that I used to register. 0 questions have been asked of it, and 0 answers have been provided. Every so often, this phone is going to take all the answers that a person has provided and push them up to the server. So you won't see it like live, but there will be like a short lag because it's only every so often that the data is synchronized. All right, so, and then you can also push messages to individuals. For example, over here, I can send a message to this person. I can say, hi there, why not answer my questions? Send a message. Oh, there's a message. Hi there, why are you not answering my questions? Okay, so that's you have sort of bi-directional communication. Note, I don't know anything about the actual identity of this person, right? To me, they're just this, that's their coupon number, okay? We're 2 minutes away from, being asked a question, so I'm gonna go over to the PowerPoint. Hopefully, this phone will stay on top. Do you guys still see the PowerPoint and the phone?
Yes, I see both.
Awesome, great. Okay, so we'll keep going and hopefully in 2 minutes we'll be interrupted with a question over here. All right, so Odin's been used in a number of different pilot studies. The first of which was called the SONA pilot. This was done with the psychology department. Trey Andrews was the PI for it. The study lasted 46 days total, and students were participating for roughly 30 days. There were 15 students. There were only 3 questions in this study and 7 rules total. So it was relatively small scale. The GPS was running, the Bluetooth was running and recording every 5 minutes. We asked on average 115 questions of each student, and 48% of the questions that we asked were answered. Roughly 1,767 intervals of time occurred in which there were 2 people who happened to be close to each other because of Bluetooth, as determined by Bluetooth. Oh, wait a second. It's 4:10. How are you feeling about the rest of the day today? Well, I'm feeling very optimistic. I don't know about you guys, but I feel really optimistic. Okay, so submit. Now we have no more questions, and that's we can keep going here. All right, so the second pilot study was PI'd by Kim Tyler, and in that one, the population was homeless individuals who were experiencing homelessness, youth, and the study duration was 29 days on average. Individuals who were in the study carried around a phone for 28 days, and we had 8 youth experiencing homelessness. We had 22 questions in that study and 28 rules. We were recording GPS, but we were not recording Bluetooth. We asked roughly 114 questions of each person, and 74% of them on average were answered. And then finally, there was a pilot study done by Jeff Smith with the RDAR cohort. Here, the individuals were opioid users in the Lincoln area. The study duration was 24 days. Participants were in the study for roughly 14 days. There were 31 participants total. There were 48 in this study, and there were 67 rules governing when those 48 questions should be asked. GPS and Bluetooth was recorded, and 203 questions were asked on average of each participant, and roughly 87% on average were answered. And there were 16,000 5-minute intervals in which 2 individuals in the study happened to be within Bluetooth proximity of each other. Okay, so hopefully, the reason why I say that sort of average number of questions asked is because you can't really say that everyone was asked 115 questions, because everyone is asked questions on the basis of the rules, and the rules are triggered by the contexts. So it's very dependent on what the person is doing, how many questions you will be asking them. And so just keep that in mind. So this number 48 means that's the total number of questions in the protocol. Each of those 48 questions might be asked many, many different times from the same person based on the fact that they are triggering the prompting of that question because of the context that they're in. Okay, so Odin is being used. I'm going to iconify this phone because there's no other rules that are scheduled to go off. It's ongoing. It's being used by Becca Brock and a project that is looking at early family environment and child behavioral health. It's funded through IDSCQR, and then it's also being used by Dennis Charg in psychology on looking at the process of alcohol use disorder recovery and relapse in terms of craving, affect, stressors, and access to alcohol. There are several proposals to NIH that are pending. Kim Tyler has a proposal that relates to youth experiencing homelessness, and Anna Jaffe has one relating to alcohol myopia. So these are some images. This is me carrying a GPS-enabled phone around for days, I think 2 weeks roughly. And you can see that there's a lot of noise here. There are periods of time when the GPS sensor stops working. There are also periods of time when the GPS sensor produces spurious data that's like wildly far from where I am. But you can also see that there are real clusters of activity and that are plausible in the sense of capturing where I was at different points in time. This is a diagram of Dennis McCharg's recently funded R21. In this, he'll be looking at the coevolution of craving and stress and access to alcohol. So important there will be to be able to ask questions when a person is near a location where alcohol would be available. So these sort of dark green dots are essentially bars and liquor stores in the Lincoln area. And then the pink dots are the locations of weekly AA meetings. And so these will be the foundation of a new set of rules that are not just based on GPS location, but are actually location cross time interval. So we know that start and end times of the AA meetings, and so we'll be able to ask a question if we detect that you've been at an AA meeting, because we know the schedule of AA meetings, for example, and we know the hours of the bars. This is a visualization of a social interaction data set. Over here, each of these colored lines is a student, and the x-axis along here is time, and the y-axis, which is the height of the curve, is the number of other students that this student happened to be close to as determined by Bluetooth scanning. So you can see that in the initial part of the day, which is essentially a lecture class, all of the students have a very high value because they're all detecting each other. That's not very controversial. They're all sitting in the same room. But as time goes on and the rest of the day, it's not like everyone's flatlining over here. It's that they actually do interact with each other, and they run into each other, perhaps deliberately or accidentally, and they're engaged in social interactions, or perhaps co-location at least. And so that kind of thing is happening and could be the basis of targeted data collection. So finally, I want to just close up by saying that the LNC has a voucher program. What it is, we offer $5,000 voucher for pilot studies that will engage this technology for human subjects data collection. Why? Principally to support the development of larger proposals in the social behavioral health sciences. Like, that's not optional, that's the reason, that's a criteria for funding. Who is it open to? Full-time faculty in the University of Nebraska system who are eligible for federal funding with no disciplinary department or college restrictions. And the next submission deadline is July 15, 2021. This is the link where you can get more information. What goes into an application? Scientific rationale, approach, and timeline, an outline of what the larger project is that this pilot is supporting, how exactly does the pilot support the premise of the larger project, where's that larger project going to be pitched and by when, and then the budget for how the $5,000 are going to be spent. And these are some examples of what $5,000 could go towards: the planning of the pilot, staff to manage the deployment during the study, participant incentives, and assistance with analysis. So that's basically it. End of my presentation. The website for Odin is up here. That's my email. This is sort of like what happens at the end of the movies, where you're sitting and there's like an endless scroll of credits. And there are many, many people who've gone into this, and how Devin and Bergen have been involved since the beginning on specifications of what is needed. The software engineering team is listed here, starting with Andy Peng in 2009, currently led by Ken P, who is on the call right now. Here are our early adopters of the technology in terms of faculty members at UNL and funding from NSF and NIH. That's it.